Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel for another episode of Infernal Intercourse. And I am here, as usual, with Pastor Brian and joined again by Todd. And today we're going to talk about the idea of consent, which we have discussed previously in the show when we discussed how Lucifer seems really interested in getting consent from his sexual partners, which doesn't always happen on television shows and certainly not in real life. And also the character of Dan Espinoza. So opening thoughts on consent, Brian?
Yeah, well, we all know by now that Dan is my boy. It's my favorite character. And I mentioned to Martha earlier, I almost wish he wasn't, because I don't want people to think that my critiques of how the show handled Dan are just because he's my favorite character. But objectively, I think I'm still pretty appalled with how the show handled Dan. And I think it really goes against the way they handle everyone and everything else most of the time. And so I am glad we're discussing this.
Okay, Todd?
Yeah, it did seem like Dan was always the brunt of every single joke, and he was always being dumped on.
We had to stand for that for past seasons.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I don't know, they did more to Dan this time around that where it's like, why did we have to do this to Dan?
Yeah.
We could have still gotten things across without doing those particular things to Dan.
Okay, so in terms of consent, we have right up front of the season, though, in episode 2 there with the musical episode, where God is basically making people do a lot of stuff without their consent. Mm-hmm. Right? So what is consent to God? If he can make people sing and dance. Now, the humans don't remember that, but they were made to do things without their consent. And even toward the end of the episode then, when Lucifer can remember being made to do it, and his father's like, what are you mad about, or something? And Lucifer's like, well, you made me sing again. So there's a point of you are doing things to me without my consent. So thoughts on that? Does God have the right to do something to you without your consent? Because he's God? Or because he's your dad? Or, I mean, does the show say anything particular about consent and God?
I don't think the show would intend to make God a consent violator, especially when they've worked so hard. And they would have to be trying to show a contrast maybe between Lucifer and God, with some exceptions that we'll talk about. And I still have my question, which is, was God, especially at the end, was God causing Lucifer to sing, or was Lucifer just singing because, that had happened, right? And I do think that they do mitigate the idea of God explicitly violating consent when they explain a few episodes later that Michael had manipulated God into having this fear that he was losing it. So.
And then we have to ask, though, was God really manipulated, or was God allowing Michael to think he was being manipulated? How deep does the 11
plan go?
Chess go?
Yeah, it's like, it's all part of his plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but then we get to the episode about Dan and the big practical joke that Lucifer plays on him for $5 million, which none of us cared for, I don't think. Todd, did you care for that episode? I didn't know about specifically.
No, it did. It didn't feel, I don't know, as it was going along, it was okay, but then as it kind of kept going along, it did actually start feeling like it was a dream or a nightmare of his, because it was starting to get more
absurd.
Corny, absurd. Yeah. I was going to say corny, but corny's not quite right. It was just like, this is getting more odd, like it's a dream or something. But
sometimes when the show remembers that it's supposed to be absurd, that the devil is in Los Angeles and goes to therapy and stuff. That's fun. Like when Ella suddenly comes up with it, Lucifer must have hit an emu with his car, and that's why he has this feather. Okay, that was pretty absurd, but those kind of work with the show. And this particular absurdity did not seem to work with the show, and I didn't think it made a whole lot of sense when we get to the end. And Lucifer's like, he's like, "Why'd you do that?" And he's like, "Well, you shot me." And it's like, but before we've had discussions where, Mazikeen tells, Lucifer, "Are you still mad at me?" And he's like, "Oh no, what am I, human? I don't hold grudges." It's like, we held this grudge for a long time, and why? I mean, he shot you and didn't hurt you at all. So why hold this grudge? It doesn't make
Well, and I mean, even when it comes to consent, as a viewer, you know, I for a long time and always have talked about, I hate these cheap plot tricks, and I definitely hate an aha got you in the plot where they for a long time have strung you along to emotionally invest in what they're telling you, and then they completely pull the rug out from it. So to me, that's a real consent thing for the viewer. I don't like that. So that was something just in general, you know, and you have these different levels of bullying, kind of predatory violence, and even terrorism. I think this episode raises to that level to put somebody through it on that level that only a celestial could have pulled off, right? So it is interesting.
Yeah, it didn't work for me. Todd, you had something to say?
Well, I was thinking, as I'm just thinking back on the episode, also the feasibility of it all, because the only reason why the episode even happened was because Espinoza decided to be the person to go get to transfer this prisoner, because originally it was going to be Chloe, and so if it had still been Chloe, then it would have completely unraveled. But so at the beginning, it's really, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, well, it almost didn't happen, but it kind of really seems like the whole episode was written for like the last 5 minutes for Espinoza to get over or to work through his issues that he's been having since he found out that Lucifer was actually the devil. That somehow this helped him get past all that, and this was how the writers managed to come up with it. But they could have done anything. But
Yeah, I didn't get that in the next episode where he tells someone, yeah, it really helped me a lot. It's like, I don't believe that it helped you to have the whole prank pulled on you. To me, these kind of pranks, that's not funny. Practical jokes are not funny. Yeah, I mean,
That reminds me of like hazing, when someone says, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to haze you because I was hazed," right? You know, flipping something that was never good and presenting it as something good. You know, I don't buy that, and I really don't buy it, since really Dan has, like Todd said, been a butt of jokes forever. And really, we don't have any legitimate bad acts from Dan since like the first season. And many people in the show have done far worse things more frequently. And so why is it okay to continue to violate Dan?
mm-hmm. Yeah, when he starts off as a bad cop, but then by the end of the first season, he turns himself in. You know, he gets demoted, and so he's been working his way back. And yet he's been, you know, detective douche for seasons for Lucifer. And there hasn't been a lot of reason for Lucifer to do that, except jealousy that maybe Chloe still likes him or something, maybe. But it just seems like he's been our character to dump on.
Which is lazy. And I don't think it presents consent in the way that the show would like to for all the other things, right? It seems very inconsistent, very cheap and lazy as a plot device. I still don't understand. Like, Todd, I'm glad you offered that, because I really couldn't find any reason even to imagine why they even did that episode. I'm like, were they trying to fill an episode? Like, it was just such a stupid thing to me.
Yeah, no, it was like the last 5 minutes, because I think it was actually at the end of that very episode, because he was talking to Lucifer, and he's thanking Lucifer because he's managed to get him over what he was, and Lucifer's going, that was not the whole point of this. Like, did I just blow $5 million? I don't know, but because he ended up inadvertently helping out Dan.
Yeah, it didn't make a lot of sense. And I didn't, then looking back on it, once we realized it's a prank, I didn't understand the group hug scene with the bike people, because Dan is elsewhere on the property getting attacked by a dog. So he can't possibly be listening into this conversation. Why are they having this conversation? They're
That's true.
by
Okay. Now that you said it even more that way, because we talked about that before. But yeah, since they could have been doing anything rather than starting to have a kumbaya moment for having scenes that really didn't. I mean, I guess it was for the viewer, but still, they didn't need to be doing that. But I guess that was, otherwise they would have given it away. But still, I don't know.
So, thoughts, Brian?
Well, again, we know, and I guess since we're spoiler alerting the whole season, well, first of all, even before this episode, I really, really have issues with the way God treated Dan, and continuing to punish Dan for something that Dan didn't do wrong. And it especially Dan was not feeling bad or guilty about his actual romantic interlude with the goddess of all creation until God did that kind of, bully dad thing. So I think, again, it was like, okay, well, let's have totally out of character. Let's have God be bully now again. Right. And so then, and especially when God fails to like let him off the hook, that God literally blows him up and lets him remember that and doesn't put him at ease about it. And then the next time that they meet again, God says it's okay, but then doesn't make sure that Dan gets the subtext that it's not. So really, really annoyed me. Not just because Dan's my dude. And so, yeah. And then, of course, that Dan is in hell. Yeah, it fits with the mythology of the show. But who made Dan feel guilty? Who gave Dan that loop that puts him in hell? That came from the Celestials. And again, that's unfair.
Okay, other thoughts on Dan? I think you had issues with him being blown up.
Absolutely. That was, and again, so we need to talk about, was God kind of, again, trauma coming out of God because he was confused, or was this all part of God's, plan? Because that was at the point where God didn't feel like Michael had convinced God that he was out of his control. But nonetheless, God could have let Dan off the hook and continue to, again, bully Dan. Not to mention that God didn't seem to know who Dan was when he was saying, oh, he has a desk. And then all of a sudden he says, yeah, you slept with my ex-wife. So all just seems like, well, we'll just make Dan the butt. And that's very bully. That's, very not healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly God just seems quite forgiving and calm with other people, and he tells Ella that you burn so brightly, or whatever, you shine so brightly. And he's telling Lucifer that I love you at the end, and he he seems perfectly fine with Chloe telling him he's a bad dad. So he is okay with Linda being the mother of his grandchild, and he just seems to be really cool with everybody except Dan.
Yeah, except Dan again. So yeah, I will be curious to see what Dan's loop actually is, because is it God's wife, or is it from all of his previous history, from basically from season 1 kind of stuff, or what is his guilty loop?
But he still seems to feel pretty guilty about how he and Nezukim turned that dude into the Russians. And she's like, "That we killed that dude," and he's like, "No, we just turned him into the Russians. We didn't kill him ourselves." And so he sounds like he's still trying to justify that. So that could be it too. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure to hit like and subscribe, and tell us comments if you have comments. Share this video around. We hope you enjoyed season 5B the way we enjoyed it, and looking forward to season 6. And we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.